The tavern reeked of iron and salt. A haze of smoke hung low, clinging to the velvet drapes and obscuring the ornate chandeliers. Victor sat alone, a dark figure in the dimly lit corner. His fingers drummed a restless rhythm against the worn oak of the table. Each beat echoed the pounding in his chest, a frantic tattoo fueled by an ancient hunger. He had walked into this den of temptation with a clear purpose, to prove his resolve, to show himself and the world that he was no longer a slave to the thirst. But the air itself seemed to whisper lies, painting vivid images on the canvas of his mind. The scent of warm blood, so close, so intoxicating, was a siren's call, pulling him towards the rocks of his inner turmoil. Victor's gaze swept over the other patrons, their faces masked by shadows and flickering candlelight. Each laugh, each whispered conversation grated on his nerves. They seemed to exist in a state of blissful ignorance, unaware of the battle raging within him, or perhaps they simply didn't care. He closed his eyes, drawing a deep breath. The metallic tang of blood filled his senses, making his fangs ache. It would be so easy to give in, to silence the craving that gnawed at his soul. One taste, that's all it would take. But the memory of his last lapse, the shame and self-loathing that followed, held him back. Another one, Victor? The bartender, a burly man with eyes as cold and hard as silver coins, leaned against the counter. His gaze was shrewd, calculating. He had seen countless souls pass through his doors, each bearing their own burdens, their own vices. He knew the signs of a struggling addict as well as a physician knew the symptoms of a disease. Victor shook his head, his throat suddenly dry. "Just water tonight, Edgar." Edgar grunted, a knowing smirk playing on his lips. "Water won't quench that kind of thirst, my friend." He gestured towards a group huddled in the corner, their eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger. "But if you change your mind, you know what we offer here." Victor suppressed a growl. This was a nightly dance, a test of wills between him and the keeper of this den of temptation. Edgar thrived on the weakness of others, profiting from their darkest desires. He saw Victor's struggle as a weakness, a source of amusement. His gaze flickered towards the other patrons. Some, like Edgar, seemed to revel in the indulgence, their faces flushed with a predatory excitement. Others, their expressions etched with a weary acceptance, treated it as a necessary evil, a price to be paid for their continued existence. Victor envied them both. Victor had tasted human blood only once, centuries ago, in the throes of his initial transformation. The memory of that night, the intoxicating rush, the feeling of power that coursed through his veins, still haunted his dreams. It was a power unlike any other, a forbidden ecstasy that whispered promises of ultimate control. But with that power came a terrible price, the loss of his humanity. He had seen what became of those who succumbed to the allure of blood, how it twisted their souls, turning them into monsters. He had sworn to himself on the graves of those he had loved and lost that he would never become one of them. The weight of that oath pressed down on him, heavy as a shroud. It was a constant battle, a tightrope walk between his primal urges and his desperate need for redemption. Every sunrise was a victory, every sunset a test of his will. But tonight, surrounded by temptation, the line between predator and prey felt dangerously thin. He longed for a world where he could exist without this constant struggle, where he could simply blend in with the humans, sharing their joys and sorrows. But that world was nothing more than a cruel illusion, a painful reminder of all he had lost and could never reclaim. A commotion near the entrance drew Victor's attention. Two burly vampires, their faces contorted in cruel amusement, dragged a young woman through the tavern doors. Her hands were bound, her eyes wide with terror. She stumbled, her bare arm grazing against the rough stone floor. The scent of her fear, sharp and tangy, cut through the smoky air, sending a jolt of primal hunger through Victor. He watched, a detached observer, as they flung her onto a table in the center of the room. She struggled against her bonds, her cries for help swallowed by the jeering laughter of the crowd. The vampires circled her, their eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger that sent chills down Victor's spine. This was not an uncommon occurrence in these hidden corners of the world where the lines between right and wrong blurred beneath a veil of darkness. Human blood, especially that of the young and innocent, was a valuable commodity, traded and bartered like any other precious resource. Victor had always turned a blind eye to such transactions, convincing himself that it was none of his concern. But tonight, watching the fear etched on the young woman's face, he felt a flicker of something unfamiliar stir within him. Righteous anger,